Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. Well, I've certainly brought the question of practice very, very close to home. In fact, it's right in front of my nose, it being my computer, which was custom built at a shop in Torrington, Connecticut, a shop called Computer Heads that I've been going to for different generations of my computers since the 80s. And the story that you'll hear when I open this conversation with Dan Oleksiw, who works in that shop with his dad, also is a wonderful teacher and department leader in a technical high school. But when we started talking, I told the story about why this computer now is zinging and doing wonderful things and giving me much more speed and much more clarity of my Zoom image, the whole thing. And it was because of him. It's because what he did, the key word being do, what he knew and then did. And so the rest of the conversation moves from there. But I'm still looking at the same computer right now, hearing it hum softly, and knowing that when I listen to this introduction, it's going to be crystal clear because of Dan and his talent and his concern for my results in making this computer a significant part of my day. So here is technical high school leader, co-owner of a computer shop of great merit, Dan Oleksiw. I'm going to start this conversation with Dan
Oleksiw.
And he just told me how to pronounce it. My short-term memory just got shorter. Dan Oleksiw. I'm going to start this conversation with him with a basic reminder of what practice is, our way of thinking of practice. And it is the conscious choice to pursue results indefinitely, no matter what the circumstances and situation, because those results matter a great deal. And therefore, a person will apply himself or herself to achieving them. And at each point in time, this will get me to when Dan and I had our last meeting, at each point in time when your practice sort of brings you in like a vehicle to the moment, you apply what you know, discover what you don't know, do some on-the-spot learning. And if that frees you up to move ahead, you've achieved an important moment in your practice. So Dan is the department head of the IT instructional technology department.
Information technology.
I'm losing it, folks. As we speak, information technology department at a wonderful high school in Waterbury, Connecticut, called Keeney.
Keener.
Well, this podcast has pretty much started out on the wrong foot, but not my appreciation of Dan, because what I'm talking about is a moment a couple of months ago now where I brought my ailing computer in. It was barely allowing anything through. The Zoom image was like a bad cartoon, it was sort of wiggling and waggling and turning colors. And Dan, who works with his dad when he's not at the tech school, and he looked at it with me. We sat out in the outer room of their shop up in Torrington called Computer Heads, and we tried different things. Swap this out, change that out, and it started to look like it was going to revive. And this is the point where I knew that I wanted to feature Dan's practice sense, because it was in that moment that he himself, even though it was functioning, the picture wasn't wiggling anymore, he said, Dave, this just doesn't seem right now. That little subtle touch just doesn't seem right. Do you remember that moment? Or, I mean, you've seen many customers since, but
Yeah.
what went through your head?
Yeah. What always goes through my head at that point is, would I be happy with this, or would this be something that I would be comfortable with, using myself? Does it feel like, a computer should? Does it work intuitively? Stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Putting yourself in my place or any customer's place, knowing that when we walk out the door of Computer Heads, we weren't working out of some big company like Dell or whoever makes big computers, or what's the electronics store that sells?
Best Buy.
Yeah, Best Buy.
Yeah.
Where it's relatively impersonal. And if you came back later and said, my computer isn't working right, they would say, well, we're not going to give you a refund, but we'll send it out to the shop. I don't know what they would say, but it wasn't the same experience. Someone who really sat there looking through essentially my eyes, and you knew that I was doing podcasting. I certainly made it clear. You knew that I had a book, in there, and it was a big outlet for me here in Northwestern Connecticut to have a functioning computer. And you also may have guessed that I'm not made of money, and that, easily could have said, well, it's dead, put the sheet over and send me out to spend $1,000 or more.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. But what did happen, since you had that intuitive sense that someone who's deep in practice, a particular practice has, it was it the hard drive? I think that's what it was.
That was part of it. So, I remember your storage space was basically full. You had consumed, all of however many gigabytes you had. You had used it all up, and once you told me you were working a lot with video, that made sense. Because that's something that does consume a lot of space. And I think while we were at it, we went for a newer CPU, because Zoom is processor dependent in the way that certain features of Zoom won't work. And I know this just from working a lot with customers and businesses that did a lot, especially over I guess what we call the COVID years. People adjusting to that and using Zoom. And Zoom decided that the company, that the virtual background settings and other settings like that only work with certain CPUs. And really only work well with a certain level of processor. So we gave you a little bit of a processor upgrade too.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish you could do that to a nearly 80-year-old man, like stick something in, click, clack, swap something out. Well, I guess that's what happens to older people. Sometimes they'll swap out the parts and put something new in. But now, as folks are listening to what you just said, Dan, what they, I think, should focus on is your understanding of the interactions among parts, the system itself, and the messages that were coming to your mind. If you said, well, Dave still can't get a background, it's still, we tried that. And so that's something there. And I know that there's a thing that Zoom has done to make sure that people who want to have the backgrounds have a certain CPU. And of course, I wasn't too sure what CPU stood for. CPU?
Central Processing Unit.
Yeah, like a brain.
Yeah.
And then there's a motherboard. There's a lot of analogies in there to human parts or animal parts. But so when I remember this vividly, he said, well, give me an hour, go have some lunch. They suggested a restaurant that was really, really good suggestion, Vinny's. So I walked down there, and when I came back, lo and behold, my machine was new again. It was like, whoa. And it zoomed and it zigged and it zagged. And I have done maybe another 30 podcast recordings since then without a flaw, not any wiggly screens or any problems.
Awesome.
And I'll tell you now, this is the point, one of the huge points of the main way of thinking of practice. While results are what you were going for as a technician, essentially, and a business person, many of the results that many sorts of practitioners achieve land on others in a good way. That in the sense of problem solving, which is what we were doing, enhancements, which is what you were doing. And the other thing about it is that result continued to compound its benefits over time. The stream of results is important. Now let's flip to your role as a teacher of people who are preparing to work in the world of information
technology.
Technology. How can you help them catch on to the compounding benefits of the solutions that they can bring to a customer or to a firm or whatever? Have you been able to teach them a little bit about you've learned about that?
Yeah. So one of the ways that we can work with high school students in that way, when they choose IT as a trade, we send them out to work amongst the staff at our school. They do a lot of work with the other teachers. The state supplies our school with, computers that are kind of good enough. Sometimes, they say, okay, here's a new computer for you. But in reality, I can look at it, and some of my, more advanced students look at it and they say, well, Mr. O, that's not a new computer. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it'll work good enough for the typical use case, I guess they assume. So anyway, I have the students start working one-on-one with teachers, where they'll go and I'll give them a briefing if it's their first or second time, and I'll say, well, this teacher's looking to accomplish, A, B, and C. They want their smart board to work correctly. They want their programs to load a little faster, and they need to play, their old DVDs or something like that. So they might need another piece of hardware that they're going to borrow, or you're going to recommend that they're going to buy it because they don't want to, assumably wait 3 weeks for the state ordering process to fulfill or whatever. So, I give them the tools that they need to answer questions like that in a quick professional manner. And I like to send the same students, if I have them with me at that point in time, back to the same instructor over and over again. And
so they become a client in a sense. Yeah,
and it works out really well. We have other shops in the school. We have the auto shop, the electrical shop. They do have computers for various things. The auto shop has a computer that runs their alignment machine, things like that. So it's kind of cool. We get a hands-on experience with, how computers are used in different ways in industry without even leaving the doors of our school. So there's that too. Our students also get to go out on work-based learning, so I'll encourage that for students that, have the time and the want to do it, once they get to their junior year and beyond. So pairing them up with a business that they, work in, and that gives them a completely different, perspective also. It's not just working with teachers who might, in a lot of ways, be a little kinder and more patient with the students, when they're out in a different environment, the expectations are different. So to learn that, and it's still kind of a safe space because they're, it's a job that, the employer still has the understanding that, okay, this person is still learning. So,
and overall, since you've been doing this a number of years, do you get the feeling that at least a significant portion of those majors in technology go on and either get straight into the job market or go on for advanced study. Have you been able to track that at all?
Yeah, a lot of, so I would say a lot of them do go on to college. More than half
That's
choose
good.
to continue studies. Computer science is a big choice that the students go for. We teach a little bit of programming in our trade throughout the 4 years. We get them, computer science fundamentals as a college credit through our course. So some students, might want to go the software developer route or something similar to that. So that'll be their target. Some students go for further learning, and the big one now is security, network security.
Network security, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big popular one. I do have probably only a couple with every graduating class go direct into the field. I'd like to see that happen more and more.
Yeah, the field would too. I think there's demand.
Yeah, but yeah, and the students that do, I keep in close touch with. One of them actually worked for us for like 8 months or so, and then when realize, and I told him, I was like, hey, you can work for us, but write down everything on your resume that I'm going to have you do. Certain. So
Yes.
I helped him pick out certain moments, in time where I'm going on site to a business and we're working on a network, and I'll bring him along with me. And it wasn't long before he realized he was sending out resumes and he was getting lots of interview opportunities. And yeah, so he, within, I think he's only 20 right now, and he's making a salary right now that a lot of adults a decade or two older than him would probably be, a little jealous of. So, it works out. And I use him as an example for other students as well. I'll say that, well,
yeah.
It just takes focus, takes, and work. And just as with any trade, the same thing with the students that go into the electrical trade. They get a certain number of hours worth of experience, and it's, not long before they're moving along the path and getting a job here and a job there. And really the IT field, in terms of the hands-on sense where a student can work, on computer systems, on networking systems. Certifications certainly help, but it's really just experience.
Yeah.
It's an experience-based field, and if they see that you have the experience in the certain areas that they're looking for, you'll be snapped right up.
I of course, have always had a tremendous interest in experiential learning, which is what you've described in one of its many configurations. But I guess my thought is that there's experience and then there's experience. And the difference is perhaps that person you had for 8 months, it sunk in. He did to take the notes. He did pay more attention. His phone was not in his hand and he wasn't checking out what's on TikTok or any of these other things. In other words, he focused his attention. And my guess is, as would be the case of many you've helped, that he did have a future in mind, that he was seeing the connection between what you were showing him and then therefore he was actually doing inside the boxes that you were repairing or building in the shop. And that on his resume was part of it. The other part probably came through in an interview or in that probation period that some people have to have, where they actually have to get out there and show that they can do the do. So that's a very satisfying situation for you, I think, as a teacher, and in this case, as a business person.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Very, very satisfying for me. I mean, that's, I used to think back when I started teaching, before I was a trade instructor, I used to think, oh, teaching's all right, but maybe I'll I'll get out of teaching at some point and just focus more on the business end of things or something like that. And I ended up, as a trade, it took kind of a winding path a little bit, but in short, once I became a trade instructor, then um, I don't know, the dividends really started coming in. It was very rewarding, and I don't see myself leaving anytime soon, leaving teaching, because it is very enjoyable. And students that come to our school for the reason of the trade, which is what that student did. Actually, I did have to encourage him a little bit to remind him that he did have to pass math and English to get his high school diploma.
Oh man, that sucks.
Yeah, yeah,
Math, English, why? How am I going to use that with my
yeah. I
hands
did have
inside
one
a computer?
serious conversation I remember with that student specifically.
Yeah,
And then they realized, okay, well, this is another a hurdle I have to get over, and I would remind him even when his writing assignments and reflection on what he was doing sometimes uh,
mm,
lacked detail and whatever. And I told him, I said, once you're out in the workforce, you're going to be required to write reports.
yep,
If you're in IT, you might be asked to give people instructions or write like a brief manual about how a certain software system works,
that's right.
especially as rise through the ranks. And he's since come back to me and said, "You were right. You were right."
You were right about writing.
But yeah, no, it is rewarding.
I want to switch over to where I first actually met you, and you were probably 10, 11, 12 years old. You were quite young, and you were essentially helping out in your dad's shop with a computer heads. Your dad, who was a teacher
Mhm.
in the technical area, but he formed this business. Initially, when I first met you, I think it was in the front room of your house, maybe even as far back as when you were in Winstead. But
Yeah.
my point is that I came looking for results because I could have easily gone out and bought a commercial computer back then. We're talking a long time ago, but there's something about that made me say, "Oh, I think I'd rather go with a custom built computer uh, because if something's not right, and for my lack of ability to learn this thing, I want to go to a human being." And I've instantly formed trust in your dad, and partly because it was clear to him and to me that while he could sell me something more than I needed, he wanted to sell me what I needed. And after the second or third computer, you guys would swap out parts and give me some benefit on parts that he could then use in another computer. So it was a wonderful business model, and it really gave me a lot of confidence, even up to the point when Dan, you and I looked at this computer that I'm staring through now, and you went back out there and said, "Well, all right, he's going to need a new CPU and this and that." But you and your dad collaborated and said, "Well, these are the markdowns we'll give you on the equipment that you did take out."
Mhm.
And that's great. So let me then go to your experience from all those years working alongside your dad. What sort of lessons did you learn about business itself, not just technical computer repair, which is a hell of a lot to learn, but just doing business in a small town, uh, which basically runs on reputation?
Yeah, I learned a lot. Um, well, first and foremost, my dad's background was in kind of small business. He started as an independent insurance salesperson,
Hmm.
and I was always around that, and that's how we started to get into computers as well. But um, so seeing how the fine art of communicating with others, and not the teaching part was something that always I gravitated towards, I realized it was what I wanted to do. But the other part of it was, at the end of the day, you're kind of moving a product also. And that's something that I don't know if I've ever really stopped learning how to do that better. It's kind of like, over the years, I guess I just become more comfortable with that idea. And making customer satisfaction and all that. I mean, that was certainly a big part of it. But getting things done in a timely manner. I remember at a young age, that was something where I struggled a little bit, and I might have even butted heads with my dad, and I would say, well, to do this right, I'm going to have to do this, and this. And he would tell me, well, how much do you think this person wants to pay you? And I was like, well, probably, $100 or something. He said, okay, well, how long is it going to take you? And I was like, oh, it's going to take hours though. And he's like, yeah, are you going to get paid?
Down to 3 cents an hour there.
Right. So,
yeah, you learn
things
scale.
like that, learning kind of the compromise of, because at the end of the day, we started the business. My mom demanded that, if you want to keep pursuing this hobby, which it was at the time for my dad and I, you have to start a business. You have to make a few bucks.
That's
Otherwise,
right.
It's not going to work.
That's right.
So there was that, learning that part of it. And then just, working with a parent as the boss, was an interesting dynamic, but
of course. Well, I've met both your folks and off and on for many years, and you're very fortunate. You have two terrific parents who complement each other in ways that couples should if they're going to stay married a long time. But there was a trust there, and I remember early on when one of my ailing computers came in, maybe even before you created the new shop, I was still back in the front room. That your father would say, okay, I'm going to give this to Daniel and he's going to work on it. And you were still in high school, and I figured you'd rather be out throwing a basketball around with friends or whatever, but it was a Saturday and you took it on and worked at it while I was sitting there twiddling my thumbs. He could have done it himself, but I suspect that what he was doing was feeding your experiential learning by saying, okay, you tackle this one. This would be a good one for you to look at. And then if you got stuck, right, you come over. Now, and you say, your dad, look at now, there is a point. I'm sure there was like a transition. And you've gone way beyond what your father could see in the moment. Like with my case, I mean, they tried very hard to solve the problem, but then they said, well, why don't you come back next week when Daniel could be here? Because they knew that there was something more going on. And so in some ways you eclipsed your dad's technical quick eye and ability to move on things, but not his sense of business. Right. I think that was and is a very strong point. And I must add that which I really admire is that your dad in particular is a religious leader. He has services in the other side of your shop, and it's a good feeling. It just like I figured no one's going to take my money away under false pretenses when I can look up and see a cross on the wall. So that influences well. So in these last couple of minutes, Dan, I think that what you said at the beginning about having an instinct or an intuition about how to know when something isn't quite right. Have you been able to transfer, now that you've had a lot of experience in schooling as a department leader and all that, have you found yourself having a similar sense that we can do something better, or this could be readdressed in a new way? In other words, making you a little more innovative than you might have been otherwise.
Yeah. Do you mean with computer systems specifically?
And with the organization of the school and the other very very highly changing aspects of working in a schooling situation, and we might draw some leadership from you.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting one. Well, from an organizational standpoint, in terms of things being right or not right, I mean, I think of at the school specifically that I work at, being a trade school, the two main things that we want the right student coming in, which I know every teacher in every discipline, wishes they could get. I'm sure.
Just give me smarter students and I'd be a brilliant teacher.
Yeah.
I've heard that speech. I don't think I've given it, but
and for us, what we're looking for is it isn't necessarily, the student that's gonna, get a perfect SAT score. We want, just a student who wants to be there, and performance notwithstanding, if they spend time in any trade, because I talk to a lot of trade instructors throughout my day and in the years, and that's what we're looking for. And but sometimes, because it's a public school, we're kind of hindered in a way. They used to have a certain method of taking students in, and that's changed over the years because of certain state requirements, and you have to take this student or that student or students from this area, and then things like that, which I understand. But one thing, so there's that. And the other thing is the student's future, is kind of, it can be heavily influenced by whether or not they get something like a work-based learning placement or something like that. And that is something that our system is starting to focus on again, with all of our trade areas. But for a while, I kind of felt like I was on an island in information technology where, I was getting kids placements, but only a couple of a year or so for each grade level, and it wasn't. I just felt like there should be more out there. So but I guess that some of that has to do with getting the right networking. Some of that did fall onto me, and I felt like I did what I could, but in that sense anyway.
It does definitely, it completes the results cycle. I mean, if it would be, to torture the analogy one last time, if you had let me go out the door with a computer that was working a little bit better, versus seeing how you could take it all the way through to the point where it was more certain that it would be functioning optimally for the age of the computer. And to be the same with the kids, you work them hard, you tell them someday, and this is how it'll be, and so forth, and hopefully they'll pick up a bit from the street or their parents and so forth. But the real test, the full test of their potential to do well in the trade, is to get them out there while they're still in school. And then you get the feedback and they get the feedback, and now you're graduating someone who you're more certain is going to build a nice future for herself, but also give the school a good reputation, which then increases the demand of businesses and agencies out there to say, give us more of your students. The ones you've had are terrific. Isn't that so?
Yeah, you're right. It is. I guess in that way, it's circular. It all comes back.
Yeah, it is. Well, Dan, I'm very grateful for this, and from the beginning of this conversation to now, I still can't remember how to pronounce your last name, because it's Jones, right? Or Smith?
Oleksiw, yeah.
Oleksiw. I'm going to tattoo that on someplace that I won't forget it, because can imagine how I got through 30 years teaching in an Britain-based school. without knowing how to pronounce or even spell a Polish name. It was like I was lost. I had to fall on the mercy of the wonderful Polish students and other who had Eastern European names. They're like, please help me out. And you've been very kind about it. As always, I truly admire you and your family. And I even, one day we by chance met on a walk at the Nepark Dam, and I saw your beautiful daughter, and I thought, oh, there's someone who's going to be out working and out thinking and out pleasing those parents, because she was delightful. So you done well, man.
Thanks, Dave.
Honestly, I don't want to have to come back to your shop for a while. Isn't that the worst part of it, though? But when I do, it'll be for a new computer. But this one's doing so well that perhaps it will be a while. So thank you again.
Perfect. Always a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Practice Podcast, where we discuss practice with a capital P. If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to enactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to enactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Oh, how could I have forgotten? Our digital book on practice as a way of being is now available. You'll find it online at www.mylibrary.world. I worked on that book after Peter passed away, and I think you will find it a unique and very, very mobile reading experience, since it's wherever your screen is in hand or at hand.